Hey everybody, it's Jerwin from ProjectLine. Today we're going to take a look at the Workflow Engine in NetSuite. So what's the Workflow Engine? It's basically a tool that allows us to automate business processes. Take a look at my screen. I have an approval process here for a sales order. And in this workflow, as you can see here, I have a state called initiation, and I have another state called pending approval. And based on the criteria that I set, or the rules that I set, for example, is the sales order over a certain dollar amount? Is the discount too high? Send it to an approval procedure. So it's going to go to the manager, and that manager can either reject or approve that sales order. So that's a particular workflow, and if I double click on pending approval, you can see all the different rules and actions that I have defined in this workflow, right? There's also single stage workflows. So as for example, on my screen here, you can see this is just a formatted search. Basically, a formatted search transfers information from one screen to another. And that is, at the end of the day, still a business process that's automated, right? I can automatically transfer. If I go to let's look at the customer record here. I have a field called comments, right? I want to automatically transfer the comments from the customer record into a field on the quote called internal comments. And I want it to happen whenever I select the customer. So again, that is another form of business automation. Let's recap that. So let's do that actually. Let's create this workflow. So what's going to happen is when I pick a customer on my quote, it's going to automatically populate this field called internal comments by grabbing the comments from the customer record. So let's go to customization. Let's click on workflow, and let's say new workflow. The first thing we need to do is give our workflow a name. So I'm going to call it pull customer comments into the quote. I'm actually going to give it the same description. I'll just copy and paste that here. And remember, the quote is a transactional document, so we're going to define the record type as a transaction type record, and then we're going to pick quote. So let's see, highlight quote. And then we're going to say it's released versus testing, because once I say it's released, it basically means it's live, right? And I can log the instance and history of whenever this workflow gets triggered. So I'll just click on this box, enable logging, and basically on the creation of a quote. At this point, let's just save this right now and let's see what happens here. Okay, so as you can see here, it's created a single state here. Now, if I wanted to, I could create a multiple state workflow. Like I could just click on here, and maybe this is a workflow where there's a yes, no, approve, reject, and I can define my rules and my actions depending on what I want. But again, let's just keep it simple. This is just going to be a single state workflow, so I'm just going to delete those. And let's give our first state here a name, right? So all we're going to do is give it a name called pull customer comments into quote, and again, we will give the description the same name. And let's just save that. And as you can see here, it has a name now, and again, I will double click on it, and I'm going to give it an action. Click on new action, and in this case, I want to set the field value. So as you can see here, it has to be triggered on something. So I want to trigger it whenever that customer code field has been edited. So after it's been edited, again, which field? I'm going to say the customer field. So I'm going to scroll down to customer. So again, let's go back to our quote. So whenever this customer field has been edited, as soon as I type in the customer name, it's going to trigger, and it's going to populate this internal comments field. So we go back to our workflow. We can also put a condition, right? I want to put a condition where only do this when the comments field actually has information in it, right? So I'm going to say where the customer comments field is not empty. So we're going to change this to not empty, and we're going to save that. Okay, so again, I don't need to do this on a schedule. I want to trigger this in real time, right? So what I'm going to do here, what field are we populating on the quote? So again, we need to define that. So we are populating the GB internal comments field, and we're going to populate it from the customer record. And then down here under field, we're going to pick the comments field. So as you can see here, I'm picking the comments field, and now I'm just going to save this. So if we go back to our quote here, right? So when I type in my customer, for example, I'm going to pick Hone MC, right? Now you can see that it has automatically populated this field with the customer comments from the customer object field, right? So that was one example of business automation. Think of the ways of how you can use a workflow engine in your company to automate certain processes. So again, you don't have to be a programmer. It's very simple to use. It's very user friendly. It's really just dragging and dropping. And if you ever need help, please feel free to reach out to us over at ProjectLine. We'll be happy to help. All right, we'll catch you on the next video.